Hey y'all, well it's story time in regards to that video I posted this morning of my husband and his mistress at the Atlanta airport. So, let me just preface this by saying, I'm a nice person, I'm a sweet person, I'll do anything for my family and my friends, and I'll help anybody out. Try to stay in my own lane, I try not to bother anyone or do any of that. But when people play in my face and plot and plan and do foul stuff, I'm not so nice anymore. And that's how most of us are. So let me start by saying on October 29th of 2022, my husband was scheduled to come home from a trip from Europe. He told me he had been over there working, and he worked a lot for his, his corporate job. I thought he was working anyway. Told me he had a speaking engagement in Europe. So I wanted to make sure that I had dinner and everything ready for him by the time he got home. So I called the airline. So I knew the flight number, and I was driving, so I couldn't, type it in my computer, because usually if you just type a flight number in, it'll just pop up what time the flight's going to land. So I had to call the airline that day. And when I asked the flight attendant, or not the flight attendant, I'm sorry, but the representative, what time that flight came in, he asked for my husband's name. And I was like, you don't need his name. I was like, just give me the flight information. If I typed it in, I just need the flight information. You don't need his name. So he was adamant about me giving the name. So I gave him the name. He comes back a few minutes later and he says, Mr. Such and Such and Miss what's her name landed 20 minutes ago. So I'm in shock, because I've been married 25, 26 years, and I'm thinking I'm just married to this upstanding citizen. So I said, no, just his name. I don't know who that other person is, but just his name. And the guy states again, he was like, Mr. Such and Such and Miss what's her name just landed a few minutes ago, like 20 minutes ago. So I'm sitting in the Kroger parking lot like, what does this mean? I'm in a state of shock, actually. So my head is spinning by this time. My blood pressure's going up. And I'm like, what does this mean? So I'm like, okay. So right after that, my husband calls. And I was trying to hold it in, trying to hold what I was feeling in. So I was like, I'm not going to say anything right now. I'm going to wait till he gets to the house. Because he was like, oh, I missed you. It's been a long, long week. This is the hardest money I ever earned. But I wish you could have gone with me. And I was like, okay, well, you can tell me about your trip when you get home. So, okay, stand by, y'all, for the rest. So when he comes home, I greet him at the door, give him a hug and a kiss and ask him about his trip while he's unpacking. And so I'm like, show me some pictures from your trip. And he was like, oh, I didn't take any pictures. I was running around working, and we were just so busy and on the go. We were just, just going to and fro. So I was like, oh, okay. So when we go to have dinner, I was like, hey, I called the airlines to see what time your flight was getting in. And I said, they told me there was someone else on your itinerary. And I tell him the person's name. And he was like, who was that? And I was like, I don't know. You tell me. He was like, oh, I don't know who that is. And he was like, He said, they must have made a mistake. So I was like, well, okay. So I went along with it, but something about it, my spirit just was not feeling right. So I was like, something about this is just not right. So that night when we go to bed, he's sleeping over there, just a snoring. I'm over there tossing and turning, because I was like, something about this just does not feel right. So something tells me in the morning when you get up, go check your credit card bills that are on the counter. So the credit card bills are all stacked up out on our kitchen counter, and I don't open them because I don't pay the bill. I mean, it's American Express bill each month. They be high. So I was like, I ain't got none on it, so no need for me to open them. But that was my account, and I added him to it years ago, and I just let him open it, open the bill and pay it. And there was sometimes I would open it, but most times I would just look at my portion of it and just keep it moving. So that morning when I get up, I go to church, and he tells me that he had to leave because he had to catch up on work and all that kind of stuff later on in the day. So I was like, okay. So I go to church, and when I come back from church, I get ready to go to the Falcon game. But something was like, check one of those credit card bills before you go. When I open up that bill, the woman that the airline employee mentioned that was on his itinerary, her name was up and down my credit card bill. flights here, flights there, flights to Paris, Delta vacations, you know, a country here, an island there. So I'm thinking this was in 1 month. So I'm sitting there like, what in the world? So by this time, y'all, I'm steaming and I got to go to this Falcon game with my girlfriends and try to act like I'm having a good time. But the whole time my mind is racing. So I was like, okay, so I come home that night. I stack up all those bills. I got bills for like 8 months worth of bills. Actually, that was October. So 10 months. I pulled from December of 21 to October of 22. And when I tell you, it was very telling. This woman's name was on every one of my bills for each of those months several times. So while I thought he was out working and telling me that I couldn't travel with him because, you know, he didn't want to get distracted. Oh, he had a travel mate, all right. He had one. Stand by for part 3. So I go through all these credit card bills, finds this girl's name for months on my credit card bills, for the last 10 months specifically. So at that time, I try to call his phone, call my husband's phone and text him. No answer, no text back. So I called his boy's house because he told me he was going to his boy's house to watch football. No answer from him. So I texted him and was like, hey, is he with you? No answer back. Then all of a sudden, here come my phone ringing. It's my husband. Like, oh, I ran out to get something to eat. Like, what's up? And I was like, oh, you know what's up. I said, and I started repeating the girl's name. And he was like, why you keep saying that name? And I was like, I kept saying the name. So he was like, well, I don't understand why you keep calling that name. And I was like, oh, yeah. I said, your gig is up. I was like, you nasty motherfucker. I was like, your gig is up. So he was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm on my way home. I'm on my way home. I was like, bring your ass on home. I was like, come home. Because by this time, I'm furious. So I hang up the phone. I'm just like livid, y'all. I promise you. I think my blood pressure was on like 1,000 that day. So he comes in, and he come in like all Billy Bad, like, why you keep mentioning that name? And I was like, you tell me why I keep mentioning that name. So I was like, I'm going to ask you this. I said, I'm going to ask you one time. I said, no, I know the truth. I was like, was such and such on this flight with you? He was like, no, I don't know why you keep mentioning that name. I don't know who that is. I said, I'm going to ask you one more motherfucking time and know that I know the truth. Don't lie to me. And it was like this mask fell off of him. And he sat down in his chair and he was like, yeah, she was with me. And I was like, okay. I said, so that's your girlfriend? He was like, yeah. I said, well, how long you been with her? He said, a couple of years. And I was like, okay. So by this time, I can't hold it together. I mean, I think all I remember doing, I remember crying, and I had a really, really bad headache. And all he said to me was, and this was what he says was really kind of like cut me. He was like he was relieved. He was like, at least I ain't got to lie no more. I'm sorry I hurt you, but at least I don't have to lie anymore. So by this time, I'm like, say what now? So I'm screaming, I'm yelling. My son's upstairs. He comes down, goes back up, because I was like, everything's fine, everything's fine. But my head is like hurting like really, really bad, guys. So I come back to my bathroom to try to get some medicine. So I was like, let me take my blood pressure. Blood pressure was like 190 over 110 or some crazy shit like that. So I was like, I got to get to a hospital. So stand by. It gets more interesting.